welcome back to Spirit of Life. I'm David McLauchlan, and my guest is Mark Bateman from Chaplaincy Australia. Welcome back to the program,
Thanks, mate.
Now, before the break, we were hearing about your own story and your faith conversion. So you were 20-odd years pastoring churches, and then you felt the call to become involved in the wider ministry of chaplaincy. So tell us a bit more about how you got involved. You spread your ministry out from being just a pastor of churches to a chaplain.
I've got a big confession to make to you, David. I'm a petrol head through and through. Back when we were kids, we were hooning around in billy carts, and then we nicked Dad's lawnmower engine and put that in the billy cart. Used to go very fast, but no brakes for stopping. And Dad got scared and got us into Speedway because we were sort of cutting a lot of corners for a safety factor, and Dad wanted us in a place where vehicles were scrutineered and there were rules and there was emergency response personnel there, and so we got into Speedway. So in my growing up years, my love for motorsport has always been there. And while we were in Perth, pastoring a church in Perth, used to be regular down at the racetrack, and my love to work and help the motorsports family was always just very natural for me. When we moved over here to Melbourne, being a good petrol head, you have to go to places like Phillip Island and Sandown for races. And I was down at Phillip Island. An old friend that I used to race cars with is now a V8 supercar owner, and he asked me, what do I do now? I told him I'm a pastor, and he said, oh, a plasterer? I said, no, not a plasterer, I'm a pastor. And so I got to help some of his young fellas out, and it just began to grow down pit lane, and race control and CAMS, the Confederation of Australian Motorsport, asked if I would do chaplaincy at the racetrack, and it was just such a hard decision to have to make. I sort of pondered on it for at least 2 seconds and said yes. And so I've been...
I suppose for a petrol head and a pastor, it's the ideal job.
Well, my registration number is Rev 000. And people say, is that Rev head or Reverend?
Yeah.
No, it's, both. And so my love for motorsport. So since that, it's been very natural for me to be involved. And so I do Phillip Island and Sandown and do Avalon Speedway. I have to go to Bathurst every year and Indy. But, gee, I love it. And so for me, chaplaincy, because it's the way I'm wired up, it's a very natural pathway into pastoring the environment to where you're wired into. And so I encourage people when I travel around, how are you wired up? Well, that's your marketplace. Get into that marketplace, because you need to be able to understand the disciplines and what goes with, etc. So it's a natural environment, just move into that pathway. And for me, then, my chaplaincy has just grown, and so I do so much for my motorsport family. I do a lot of weddings and sometimes funerals, and help the people going through their tough times. Sometimes when there's accidents at the track, I do all the peer support and look after the family and work towards reducing the trauma that they're going through, the shock of what's happening, and look after families, yeah. And look, the beauty of all of that is that I believe that there is a God who loves us, and so you can always ask him to help out in those situations, for his peace to come on board and help them transition through and deal with the issues that are at hand. And then together with your peer support, help them come through those tough times. Our motto in Chaplaincy Australia is supporting people through life.
So do you find that, as a enthusiast in a particular area, it's easier to be a chaplain to that area?
Oh, most definitely. If you asked me to be a chaplain to the girls' knitting club, I wouldn't do very well at that. But definitely how you're wired up, and I think that's a lead for however God's wired you up. If that's where your passion and you'd love to invest your time in, then that's the market field, that's the marketplace to get involved with. And it's that involvement that makes it very natural. I can talk to a petrol head because I know what he's talking about. And if you didn't know what you were talking about, then you'd have difficulties in trying to filter into that sort of environment. But because it is passionate within your heart, then it flows somewhat natural, opens a doorway.
Do you find that your own experience of God and your own passion for motorsport, and that you're a chaplain in that area, gives people who perhaps have no faith, or gives them something to relate to? They can see that
definitely.
Here's this, guy who's just like me. He's a revhead from way back, and and he loves his motorsport, and so do I. And he believes in a God, and that gives an example to me.
Yeah, I don't go out there to actually recruit people for church. No, I go out there to support people who are doing the sport that we both enjoy. But out of that, I find that you meet people where biblical principles that you've learnt and work. I know God answers prayer. I should have died in a truck. If He didn't answer prayer, that's what would have been my outcome. But here I've got people who are in times of difficulty. And so what I work with is that I can very easily speak into their lives about things that are so important. And because it's from a person that they know they're connected with, we can do it together. I can help them and support them in their situation.
On that note, we've come to the end of the program, Mark, but I'd like to have you back on again next week.
Love to come back.
Great. You've been watching Spirit of Life. I'm David McLauchlan. We'll see you again next week.
Bring it to birth and blow where you will. Blow, blow, blow till I be but breath of the Spirit.